Hello everyone, thank you for joining today's talk. My name is Tara Kapur and I'm in the 10th grade at Head Start Educational Academy, Bangalore. My brother Shiv and I saw this lockdown as an opportunity to help us all by bringing professionals from various domains to expose our students to a spectrum of careers. Before we begin, we would like to tell you a little about our guest speaker, Mr. Anupam Jaiswal. Mr. Jaiswal is the president of DuPont South Asia and sales director of Transportation and Advanced Polymers, India and ASEAN. He is also chairman of the board, Performance Specialty Products India Private Limited, a wholly owned subsidiary of DuPont. He joined DuPont India in 2009. At DuPont, he has worked in various leadership roles in marketing, strategic planning, sales, and business management. He was named to his current position in August of 2018. He holds a Bachelor of Engineering degree in Production Engineering from Pune University and an MBA with a double specialization in marketing, corporate innovation, and entrepreneurship from UPenn, USA. Before we let Mr. Jaiswal take over, we would like to establish a couple of housekeeping rules. Firstly, please keep your videos off and remain muted throughout the session. And secondly, if you have any questions for Mr. Jaiswal, please send them to us in the chat box at any point of time during this call. We will pose your questions directly to our speaker. Thank you. Mr. Jaiswal, would you please take over from here?
Hi, Tara. Just give me a second. I hope, can you see my screen video? I mean, is my video on right now? I'm just making sure.
No, we can't see you.
Oh, okay, my apologies. Yep. Is that on now?
Yeah.
Perfect. And can you confirm that you can see my screen now?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Perfect. Thanks, Tara. Pleasure to be here today. And I'm just going to, run through just actually 3 or 4 charts. And, I prefer to give a lot of time for you all to ask me questions that you may have. So the first set that I'm going to go through is really around my career journey in terms of, what have my experiences been. And then, as I reflect back upon them, what have been my takeaways from that in terms of, what a prospective student who's looking at career opportunities can look at. I'll talk a little bit about DuPont, not for more than a couple of minutes, just to give you a flavor of what the company is. And then really talk to you about what are the career opportunities in case you decide to pursue a career in pure sciences, right? So if you decide to get a master's or a PhD in science. And then finally, I'm going to give you a view of what are the kind of roles that exist in a science/innovation company like DuPont and how there's an opportunity for people that don't come from a science space to work in a company like that, if that is your domain of interest. I hope to try and cover this in about maybe say 25 minutes or so that I leave adequate time for questions. So jumping right in, why isn't my slideshow working? Okay, there we go. So, my career journey began, at our time, it was relatively simple. We had 3 choices: art, science, or commerce. And it was generally, if you're good in math and science, you went to science. If you were an average student, you went to commerce. And if you were a poor student, you went to art. That was just a paradigm, which is so different from what it is like today. So, I know you grapple with a lot of choices as compared to what we had. So in my case, the choice was pretty clear. I came from a family of engineers. My grandfather was an engineer. My entire paternal family, my father, my uncle, his daughter, 3 of them were engineers. The only black sheep in our family was my other aunt, who actually happened to be a doctor. So for me at that point in time, it was very evident that I wanted to be an engineer based on whatever I had seen. And the choices were very clear for me. Amongst all the faculties of engineering, I really had only 2 choices which I had to make. Was I going to be a mechanical engineer or was I going to be a production engineer? So I chose to do my production engineering. And the reason for that was very simple. I did a little bit of research and I figured out mechanical engineering involves, the designing of heat engines, etc. I didn't want to get into the applied sciences space. So I said, okay, production is more practical. It is taking those skill sets and converting them into actual production of goods. And that's kind of what I thought would excite me. So I chose to do my production engineering, right? Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Guess what? I hated it. Okay. So as I was going through my production engineering, I really figured out that I did not want to be an engineer. Okay. And that was one big lesson for me, which I'll share with you right at the end, is that very often you don't know what you want to do until you actually start doing it. But the silver lining for me was as I was doing my production engineering in my final year, we had a whole bunch of management subjects. And what I came to realize is I actually began to enjoy those management subjects. So I think, at that point in time, so it was actually almost about 3 years into my engineering that I figured out I didn't want to be an engineer. And my career path kind of got a little bit of clarity that I wasn't going to get into pure engineering. I was going to drift more towards the management side of things, okay? Then became the critical question, do I get an MBA or do I start working once I finish my engineering? Again, at the time when we were growing up, which was probably a good 20 years back, and I had to make all these choices, the career paths were very, very clear. It was you study, you finish your education, whether you wanted to do your bachelor's, you do your master's, etc. You get a job, you start working, and then that was the end of your, that was the beginning of the rest of your life, I should say. I shouldn't say the end of everything. But, I decided to break the paradigm because what I realized was I was interested in international business. I wanted to go and do an MBA overseas. And that required me to have at least 3 to 5 years of work experience, right? Most Indian MBAs, and I got into NMIMS, which was a decent school in India at that point in time, were willing to take students right out of, undergrad degrees or bachelor degrees, as we call them in India. So I swam against the stream and I told my parents that though I've gotten into NMIMS, I'm not going to do my MBA. I'm actually going to work for a while before I apply for my MBA. I respect my parents for giving me that choice, for respecting that opinion of mine. And I decided to take up a job. I still decided to give engineering another chance. And I began to work in my father's factory. So he had a small little manufacturing unit in Nashik, where he used to make electrical control panels. And being a production engineer, I said, yes, that was my calling. Maybe I didn't like the academic part of it. Maybe I liked the practical part of it. So I went and worked. Nobody was going to give me a job outside of engineering. So I joined an engineering startup where we were trying to do projects for the oil and gas industry, projects, services, and so on and so forth. And I loved it. Did it pay me well? Absolutely not. Okay. But the biggest thing for me was that I was actually able to learn a lot of stuff in the sense that I did the interiors of the office. I set up the computer systems of the office. I did the first sale. I actually decided to change the business model which we had, from projects. Let's look at...
Mr. Anupam, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Guys, can you please not draw on the screen? Thank you. You may continue now.
Yeah. So I joined that startup and it was interesting because I got to do a lot of stuff that I would have never gotten to do in a big company. So my dad would always joke with me, right? If you want to work for free, why don't you come and work for me? And I told him, Dad, the education that I'm getting working for this small company, though they pay me pittance, and the experience that I'm getting is worth its weight in gold. So I worked there for about 7 years. And that's when I decided to apply for my MBA. Now, at the point of my MBA, again, there were a whole bunch of choices. Was I going to do marketing? Was I going to do finance? Was I going to do supply chain? Was I going to do entrepreneurship, strategy, or leadership, right? And this was a big step because I was going overseas. We took a risk. I was married at that point in time. So I took a chance. My wife was doing well. She was working in advertising. She quit her job. I quit my job. So after having a running income and a household for 7 years, both of us quit our job, no income anymore, decided to go to the US, and I was going to study my MBA. The only thing that was clear to me of all these faculties of specialization, I was not going to specialize in finance, right? So you can see at the age of 27, 28 also, there is still confusion in terms of what you want to do. The advantage that we had was, like most MBAs, at least overseas, I'm not honestly sure what the MBAs are like in India today, but the first year, you actually dabble in each one of these areas. And that's when it kind of became clear to me that I was going to focus on marketing and entrepreneurship, which we actually called corporate innovation and entrepreneurship. And then I was also thinking about a little bit of strategy. You know, I thought maybe I'll do a triple major, but then I realized it's too much. Let me just go double major. So the advantage was for the first 1 year, I could dabble in each one of these subjects. And my second year, I could choose my specialization and get into that area. So coming out of SMEAL, I was Penn State University. I was lucky enough to do my internship over there between my first year and second year of MBA. I got a job offer to join DuPont in the US once I graduated a year later. And, I loved my summer internship over there, so I decided to do that. I worked in the US at DuPont for nearly about 6 years. And then I chose to move back to India because, I wanted to come back and do something here. So long story short, it's been 15 years at DuPont now. Okay. And the reason I've been here for so long is because I absolutely love the company and I love what I'm doing. So, the idea of this story was not to just walk you through my career, but to tell you what my key takeaways were from these experiences. The first one is that uncertainty is real. So if you are grappling with, what it is that I want to do, and I'm not sure, and if there are any parents on the line and your kid's not sure about what they want to do, don't worry about it. It's real. I realize even in my professional career today, as people work for me, 40, 45 years old, and I ask them, so what do you want your career to be? And what do you want to be, in another 5 years? A lot of them don't have their answers. So what I would advise you to do as you're making your decisions, you're making your choices, you're thinking about what you want to do, seek counsel. Today you have a lot of educational career counselors, etc., which weren't really prevalent at our time. Seek their help. Try and understand what it is that the career that you're planning to pursue entails. Get some education around there. The other one is get mentors. Today's world, the initiative which Tara has taken and Shiv has taken, putting this whole thing together, take advantage of these kind of things. Talk to professionals who are working in the spaces that you're thinking, get a better handle of what that might be. And finally, do a lot of research. At our time, there was no internet. Today, you have a lot of stuff on the internet, so search, Google, look around, use sources like LinkedIn if you don't already have it. I know some of you all are really young, but if you know what LinkedIn is, if you've used LinkedIn, connect with people. If you ask questions, people are willing to help you out. So first and foremost, if you're uncertain, don't get frustrated. It's real and it will be there. I was confused at the age of 28. What specialization did I want to do during my MBA? The second thing which I would tell you is experiment and take risks. Okay. I can tell you I've taken a couple of risks in my life. I did my engineering. Midway through my engineering, realized I didn't want to be an engineer. Then it was taking a risk of not getting into MBA right out of graduation. Worked for 7 years, which was not the norm at that point in time. Quitting a very comfortable life in my father's factory and joining a startup company, working there for 7 years. My wife and me quitting our job and moving to the US, no income for 2 years after having done pretty well and earned decent money for the last 7 years. When you're young, take these chances. If you're uncertain, you're not sure, you have a couple of interests, dabble in them. Check them out. See if you want to make them your career path, okay? You have a lot of opportunities for internships, right? Summer vacations, a lot of kids go for classes, tuitions. I will do Hegemon, I will do United Nations, mock United Nations and all that stuff. Great. I'm not trying to say those aren't worth it. They're definitely worth it. But if you're thinking, hey, I want to dabble, maybe, I'm interested, a lot of you also watch MasterChef, right? I'm interested in becoming a chef. I want to run a restaurant. If you have a contact, go to someone who has a restaurant, spend 2-3 days there, request them, can I spend 2-3 days just observing stuff? Get a handle of what that is. Those opportunities exist there for you. Meet people, and most importantly, as you're young, take chances, okay? Trust me, they will not always work out. But the risks and chances that you can take when you're younger are a lot more than you can take now. Today, I have 2 kids. One's in the 8th grade, one's in the 7th grade. Can I take the same chances that I took 20 years back? The answer is no. So take risks, take chances when you're young. So these are some of the takeaways that I had from my early career and my path to where I am today. Changing gears a little bit to, what's a science/innovation company? Now, I don't know how many of you know DuPont, but DuPont is about a 215-year-old company. We think we've shrunk a lot because we've divested a few businesses, but we are still about a $24 billion revenue company, $1 billion. And our market capitalization, which is the valuation of the company, is about $60 billion. We have about 40,000 employees, and we are existent in about 70 countries around the world. And that's a smaller version of what we were once upon a time. So what's this company about? We classify ourselves as an innovation/science company. And what we try and do is take world-class science, whether it's in polymer engineering, whether it's in the nutrition science space, whether it's in genomics, whether it's in entomology, whether it's in plant genetics, whether it's in catalysts. So basically taking the engineering, material science, chemistry, the biological sciences side, and taking what you call pure research and R&D and converting that into practical solutions that work for you. And the areas that DuPont is focusing on are food, energy, and protection right now. So while a lot of you have not heard of DuPont maybe, or don't know DuPont, I can assure you, you're probably using hundreds of DuPont products without even knowing it, okay? From your cell phone. Your cell phone is probably about 40 to 50% DuPont stuff. Because we're an ingredient company, you don't know it. If you get into your car and you open the hood of your car, there's probably about 8 to 10 kilos of DuPont stuff over there, all the metal which has been converted into polymer for lightweighting. The red seat belt buckle that you have, that is a fail-proof DuPont product, okay? Your airbags, DuPont products go into that. So we're an extremely diversified company. The yogurt which you eat, all the epigama which you eat, all the dahi which you eat contain our probiotics, our enzymes. The proteins which you have in your supplements like Protein X, etc., have our products. So, we're truly a science company that works on the back end. And the reason I'm telling you a little bit about DuPont is just so that you know what is this kind of a company that you could potentially work for if you have an interest in pure sciences. So moving away from DuPont, if you choose to do a career in pure sciences, what are the career opportunities or what are the potential career paths that you have? So the first one is really pure research and development, okay? So what do you do in pure research and development? You work on long-term breakthrough, innovative products, material solutions, molecules, which are targeted towards solving a scientific challenge, okay? So if I give you some of the products that have been actually invented at DuPont, they include things like nylon, mylar, cellophane, which you've used. I think some of you all would have heard of Kevlar, which is the bulletproof stuff. And Batman fans know that his vest is made out of Kevlar. Nomex, then the good old days, Teflon, Freon. These are all products that were invented by DuPont. And these came out from an R&D center that we have. So we've had 3 Nobel laureates work for us, people who won Nobel Prizes in chemistry and physics. And it's kind of interesting, we've actually won an Oscar award way back in the 1960s, a technical award in the Oscars for enhancing, motion film technology. So what can you do in R&D and what does a job in R&D mean? It really means on working on, pure chemistry. So fans of Big Bang Theory, stuff that Sheldon, Cooper, Rajesh Kutrapali, Howard Wolowitz, and Leonard work on. I'm not sure how many Big Bang Theory fans are there. So in a real practical sense, in terms of what's happening today, all the R&D scientists who are working on the COVID vaccine, right? They come from a background in pure sciences. The other thing I think a lot of you all must have heard is, emerging technologies for electrical vehicles, autonomous driving, like, self-driving cars. You've heard a lot about, the greenhouse gas emissions and how do you reduce emissions and dependency on fossil fuels, which is moving towards hybridization of vehicles, electrification of cars. So the R&D scientists work on products, molecules, which will go into the battery, materials, etc., that can be applied in these spaces. So that's one potential career that you have if you, pursue an education in pure sciences. The second one is application development. So here what you do is you take a molecule or a material that has been developed and you convert it into a practical application. So for example, I talked about Kevlar. Kevlar is the bulletproof stuff that we invented. So that was just a fiber actually, which we invented. Now that has to be converted into a product. So Kevlar is woven in a special manner to make bulletproof jackets, which are worn by police forces as well as our army, to make helmets. It also finds application in your wires, your iPhone wires, your headphones. They have a Kevlar string running through it, which basically prevents the wire from snapping over a period of time. The second one is Nomex, which is another product, which is a fireproof material, which we invented. But that again was a fiber. So how do you convert that into a usable product, right? So it has to be converted into fire protection coveralls, which are used by the firefighters of the world. We have a lot of proteins. So I think some of you all might have heard of these new products which have come out, which are called Impossible Burgers, etc., which are meat replacements. They're pure vegan, pure vegetarian products, but they're imitation meat. So how do you take the protein which we develop in a lab and convert that into a physical product? That is the job of the application development team. If I go back to the COVID example, what will happen is R&D scientists will develop the vaccine and the molecule or the protein which will help us protect against that disease. Now that has to be converted into an actual vaccine, and the virus is probably going to mutate. So the application development team will be working on fine-tuning that product to make sure that COVID-19, COVID-20, COVID-21, as the virus mutates, can be taken care of by the same vaccine. So that's kind of an example of what application development does. The third one is technical services. This is really working in collaboration with the R&D team, the application development team, and the customers, right? To basically convert these theories of science into actual practices. So, it's easy to do things in a lab, but they need to be scaled up. And once they're scaled up, they need to give the same product with the same efficacy, same quality, high productivity, etc. So the technical services team works along with R&D, application development, and the customers to processize this. So if I go back to the COVID example, what will happen is now the vaccine has been invented. They need to be produced in the thousands and millions, right, in a plant. So the technical services team will be setting up the process along with the customer to make sure that the vaccine can be produced in a consistent manner and deliver the same effective results when it is used, whether it's vaccine number 1, whether it's vaccine number 100, whether it's coming from a plant in the United States or whether it's coming from a plant in India. So just to be sure, just to clarify, we don't work in the area of vaccines. I just gave that as an example, kind of crystallize some of what these career paths are. And then finally, you can take up a role in commercials and sales. With a background of pure sciences in a science and innovation company like DuPont, you can actually take on several commercial, marketing, or sales roles also. So you can become a sales manager. You can do strategic marketing. So strategic marketing would be like, we've invented a molecule. We want to figure out where can we commercialize this. So you'll do a white space study about different areas where there is an unmet need and try and develop a solution that would be relevant for solving it. Let me give you an example of Kevlar again. Kevlar was actually invented as a reinforcement for tires so that tires don't get punctured. But most of the application of Kevlar today is actually in the bulletproof and the ballistic armament space. So all your bulletproof vehicles, all your tanks, your armored vehicles, all your life protection vests are made out of Kevlar. So that was done by the strategic marketing team because they saw some properties that were applicable to a problem that needed to be solved. And then finally, the other area you can work in this product management, which is figuring out new application areas where you can use the material or advise the customer based on their needs or their problem, which is the best material in your portfolio that you can offer them. So these are the different kinds of careers that you can pursue if you dabble or you you get your education in pure sciences. And once again, to explain what pure sciences are, it's like getting a PhD. It's getting like an advanced master's in one of the science subjects. So moving on to my last chart is, that's about, so what are the kind of careers that you're going to have in a innovation or science company? So I'm not talking only about DuPont here. I'm talking about other, good science companies in the international space. There's DuPont, there's 3M, there's Honeywell, there's ITW. And it was kind of interesting when I was looking and putting together this chart, I realized all of them have red logos for some reason. There are a lot of companies like that in India. The Birla Group, Aditya Birla Group has a few companies. Tata's have a few companies. Reliance has a few companies in the pure sciences group. Does it mean you need to be a scientist to get into this company? No, we hire all kinds of people. We need lawyers, we need accountants. So we need people from the art stream, people like lawyers, right? HR professionals. We need people from the commercial stream or commerce stream, accountants, financial analysts. And then we need people from the science field, which are pure scientists and engineers. We need supply chain experts. And these are just a sampling. So if you don't study pure sciences, does not mean you can't work for a pure science company. I, for one, hated organic chemistry, and I'm working for a chemical company, right? What used to be a chemical company, and we've kind of redefined ourselves into a science/innovation company. But I think what's really important for you to keep in mind is to work in a company like this and to really enjoy yourself, irrespective of which field you come from, right? Or which educational background you come from, you need to have a passion for science. You need to have a love for science, because that's when you will really do true justice to your role that you're undertaking. So I think I've taken about 25 minutes as promised. I'll pause here and, just to give you, I'll be happy to take any questions right now. But just to share with you, these are actual products that come out from the DuPont portfolio. And these are just some, we make hundreds of thousands of products, all the stuff that goes into a car, parts that go into a jet engine, stuff that goes into photovoltaic cells, stuff that goes into cheese. What you see over here, these pipes, these are actually water purification units in a reverse osmosis plant. In fake meat, the Tyvek coveralls, which we all heard about, PPE being in short supply. We make those, bulletproof vests, armored vehicles. And if you go to any pure science conglomerate or diversified science company, you will find they will have a portfolio like this. There are a wide variety of faculties, businesses, and areas that you can work in. I've worked in 8 different industries in my 15 years at DuPont. So with that, I'll stop my presentation right now and would be happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Jaiswal. So we're going to start sharing the questions with you. So our first question is, what kind of internships would you recommend students do? And these are high school students, if they're looking to enter this field.
So, what I would suggest is getting an internship in a company like DuPont. It depends on your geographical location also, right? So if you're based out of Bangalore or you're based out, look for something that's local to start with. The kind of internships that you can get over here are not an area where you'll be able to possibly contribute much, because most of these companies do require you to have an advanced degree. But, spending even a week over there through your contacts, hey, can I shadow an application development person? Can I shadow an R&D scientist? So what that means is you will follow the R&D scientist, see what the R&D scientist does for a week. You will attend meetings along with them. You will see what it is that they do, the kind of conversations that they have. And we do that, even at DuPont for that matter. There are people after their high school, they've come and they've done an internship with us for a week. Some have stayed for 15 days. I really wouldn't call it more of an internship. I'd call it more of an immersion in the company. But then, once you've done your 12th, you can probably say that, hey, I have a little bit of a background in science. Can I support you in your research work, for example? It's desktop research work. A lot of these companies may be hesitant to put you in a lab because of liability issues, because of risks. We deal with a lot of dangerous stuff. You can imagine a company that's working on the COVID virus or dealing with viruses and stuff. So they want to be extremely careful. But there are a lot of possibilities. For a high school student, I would say look for immersions. even if it can't be in a multinational company. If someone's interested in R&D in a pharmaceutical space, you can go there. If you get an opportunity to go and look at R&D in a food company, right? Even something like a Unilever or a Palmolive, for example, they do a lot of stuff around science. You'll be surprised how much science goes even into, I hate to say it, even a McDonald's burger, right? So find a company that has a science backbone, has an R&D or a development center, and try and get some sort of an immersion there.
Thank you. Moving on to our next question. How do individuals' habits help shape their careers and their opportunities?
How do a person's habits? Okay, so the first thing I'd like to say is that there is no cookie cutter model for success. Okay, and you are who you are. There are traits, as much as your parents may like it or not like it, or they appreciate it, you are going to be who you are to a large extent. I think what's really, really important is for a person to be aware of two things. One is, where are their strengths? Okay. And always try and capitalize on your strengths, especially when you start your career early on, in order to earn credibility. Because credibility is established when you're successful and you do a good job. So as you take on a new assignment, your first job or whatever be it, or even in your education, where you have a US style of education, where it is not exam based necessarily, but it is assignment based, classroom interaction based, and you're graded on that kind of stuff. Establish credibility early on. Focus on your strength. Okay. Second thing is, be aware of your weaknesses. Every person has their strengths. Every person has their weaknesses. So if you're in a team environment, you're working in a team. I know a lot of international schools, a lot of business schools through my business education. We actually did our assignments and projects in teams. Our grades were team-based grades. They weren't necessarily individual grades. Identify your weaknesses and surround yourself with people who can bridge those gaps for you, who can help you bridge those gaps, right? So I think if you ask me about personal habits, etc., I think these are two important things: being self-aware about your strengths and your weaknesses, leverage your strengths, and try and bolster your shortcomings is the best way I could put it. The other thing for me is, be true to yourself. Okay, be genuine. If you, and this is whether you're in a school environment, whether you're in a professional environment, whether you're in a college environment, and that's one thing I always tell my kids. I honestly don't care about the grades you get. What's important for me is, give it your best and make sure you understand and you comprehend what you have studied or what you are doing, because that is what is going to help you get ahead in life. That is what's going to help you get successful. Grades are important to help you get into a particular college, etc., but grades are not going to make your career. Okay, I can tell you for a fact, through my engineering, I was a very average student. For my MBA, I was a pretty decent student. Was I the top of my class? The answer is no. Have I had a very successful career? Yes. Are all the toppers in my school and college doing better than me? The answer is no. So, grades are important. Don't get me wrong. Parents, and don't use this with your parents saying, hey, I heard a career talk for someone who's doing okay in life, who told me, grades don't matter. They do matter. But I think what's more important is comprehending, understanding, and being true to yourself.
Thank you. Moving on to our next question. Could you tell us a little about your experience doing business abroad and what did it entail?
So doing business abroad. I think business is business everywhere in the world. But there are a couple of nuances as far as business is concerned when you work overseas. Firstly, let me start with the cultural differences. There are cultural differences in how we work in India and how we work overseas. First and foremost, coming to meetings on time, right? And I'll share a very simple example with you. My boss used to sit in the cabin next to me, and we had a meeting scheduled for 1 p.m. in the afternoon, if making up the time here, not the story. And he was about 10 minutes late. And he was my boss. He walked to my cabin and he said, "Hey, Anupam, I know we had a meeting scheduled at 1 o'clock. It's 1:15. Is it still convenient for you to meet, or should we reschedule this meeting?" Right? He respected my time. So it wasn't about seniority. It was about respecting everyone's time. That was one thing which is a little bit different from what I see in a business environment in India. I think we are changing a little bit, but we still have a long way to go. The other aspect was, the hierarchy. And I don't think this is only about India. I think this is about Asia because, I manage teams in Thailand. I manage teams in Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, Japan, Korea. There seems to be a hierarchy in Asia. It's my boss. If my boss says something, generally you don't challenge your boss. It's a little different depending on which company you work for. I work for DuPont, which is an American company, so our culture is very American. So we encourage people to question. I personally encourage people to question. I encourage my kids to challenge me and question me, as I do people who work for me. But that's a little bit of a cultural difference between India and the United States, where I should say Asia and the United States rather, where in Asia we have a little more hierarchical culture. We say we don't question seniors, we don't question adults. While in the US, it was fair game. It was okay to ask people questions. The other thing which I would say is a little bit different between the United States and India is, and again, I talk from a pure science standpoint, is I actually think there's a lot more research. There's a lot more development that happens in the West. And this is not to diss India and say, we're really good at improvisation. I think as you get older and you begin to look at business books, you'll hear about jugaad, right? I'm sure you'll have all heard the word, but we've talked about jugaad in Indian industry. Jugaad is tweaking, and it is, I would say, innovation. But these are generally short-term solutions towards innovation. I think if you're looking for a career in pure sciences, pure R&D research, I think you find a lot more of that happening in the West. And the reason for that is actually very, very simple. There are only two reasons. I think there's a lot of university partnership at the research level in the West as compared to India. We need to figure out how do we change that in India. And then the second thing is the companies have a lot deeper pockets in the United States. People are willing to pay more for new innovative products as compared to India. Being richer economies, I'm sure India over a period of time is catching up, and we're already catching up. Like DuPont, for example, we spend close to about 5% of our revenues on R&D, which is close to about, in today's terms, is close to about $1.5 billion on R&D. I don't think there are too many Indian companies, which may be even larger than DuPont, that spend that money on R&D. So, if you were to ask me what are the three big differences, two are about culture, and then the third one is about a pure science company, since that's the subject we're talking
about. As you said earlier, that you did an MBA but didn't go into the business field. How would you say that has helped you in your career?
So I actually, after my MBA, I did get into the business field because I worked in a pure science company. But while I worked in a pure science company, I was on the business side. I'm a very bad engineer. Let me tell you that right off the bat. So I've always worked on the business side. It's been in sales, it's been in strategy, it's been in marketing, it's been in general business management. So I'm a generalist, not a specialist. But earlier on in my career, when I decided not to do my MBA, and I decided to work for my dad's factory for 2 years and then work for nearly about at the startup company, the way that helped me, prior to getting my MBA was when I got into an MBA, I actually wasn't studying theory. A lot of that was practical for me. When they talked about concepts in accounting, they talked about concepts in cash flow, they talked about concepts in marketing, they talked about concepts in strategic analysis, strategic choices, managerial accounting, financial accounting. Because of having worked for 6 or 7 years, I could much better grasp that subject. And that's the reason, if anyone is planning to get an MBA overseas, my strong recommendation to you would be, please make sure you work for at least 3 to 5 years before you get in for your MBA. Ideally 5 years. 3 is the bare minimum that I would recommend. Because what happens is when you get into the university, you understand the concepts better. As I said, even when we interview coming out of MBA, and I was on a lot of interview panels when we were hiring people later on, we don't ask questions about how many marks you got. What we didn't ask theoretical questions. We talked about the real life work experiences. So that's why it becomes extremely, extremely important for you to have some good, solid, robust work experience before you get into an MBA. Does not mean that if you go right in, you're not going to get a job. You may get a job, but trust me, it's going to be a lot tougher. Did I answer your question, Tara?
I think you've answered the person who asked the question.
Okay.
Yeah. So moving on to our next one. Do you think there are any opportunities for pure science students in the automobile industry?
Absolutely. There are, one of my business is Transportation and Industrial Polymers, and that's what I run for, except for China and Japan, I run that business. There's a lot of opportunity because in the automotive space, what's happening is there's a lot of innovation. In fact, we are at an inflection point, I would say, or a tipping point right now in the automotive industry where there is disruptive innovation coming in. So if you look at the evolution of vehicles, right, starting from the Ford T model, where the level of innovation, and I don't know if you all have heard this story or not, Henry Ford had once very famously said, you can have a T model in any color as long as it's black. So basically what it meant is, this is the product we have. You want it, you take it. You don't want it, you don't get it. But with competition coming in, people have had to innovate. So, a lot of innovations took place in terms of safety, in terms of performance, in terms of lightweighting. But lightweighting was more in terms of fuel efficiency. But right now, with all the focus on the greenhouse gas emissions, global warming, etc., which is real, I think people are becoming more conscious. And there is a technological shift, which has been, I think we've been dabbling in it maybe for the last 8 to 10 years. Hydrogen fuel cells were being looked at. There is one technology which is being used in Iceland where they're actually using water. So they're basically ionizing and breaking water into hydrogen and oxygen, which generates a lot of energy to run the vehicle. And they're running a few buses. So the only byproduct is steam. You talk about electrification of vehicles, right? Which the government of India has said by 2030, we would like to have all public transport, all two-wheelers electrified. In fact, they wanted to go with passenger vehicles, but that was probably a little too ambitious. So you're at a cusp where technology has to change. Battery technology has to come in. You need to have new technologies in terms of connectors. There's a lot of opportunities in pure sciences. Now, where does the opportunity lie in pure sciences? It lies with the OEMs, which are companies like Honda, Suzuki, Toyota, Maruti Suzuki for that matter, Mahindra and Mahindra. Why is Mahindra and Mahindra dabbling in Formula E? The reason is because they want to use technologies in Formula E, see how they work, and then adopt them in commercial vehicles or in passenger vehicles. So that's one set of companies where you have an opportunity in pure sciences in the automotive space. The other area is probably in tier ones. Now, tier ones are large suppliers of technology packages to the automotive companies. So companies like Denso, companies like Continental, companies like Valeo, companies like in India like Motherson, Tata Toyo Radiators, Tata Engineering, Tata Auto Components. These are different kinds of companies. And if you do a little bit of research on what are big tier ones, they also actually do a lot of innovation. In fact, Denso, Toshiba, and Suzuki have recently signed a joint venture to try and develop technology for batteries for electrical vehicles, specifically for India. So yes, there is a tremendous opportunity. These are just some companies that you can probably look at and do some research on.
Thank you. Moving on to our next question. What kind of career can a pure math student make in a large company like DuPont?
A pure math. Okay, so a pure math student, and I can answer this with a degree of conviction because I have one of my nephews. Is he my nephew? My cousin. He's much younger than me, but he's a cousin actually, who has gotten his PhD in mathematics from Princeton University. Of course, he's in the US and is now working for a company. Actually, there are a lot of career opportunities for a person who's interested in pure mathematics. You can get into actuarial studies, which go into the insurance sector. You can get into the financial sector, where you can be working on arbitrage opportunities. You can be working on derivatives. You can get into statistics, hardcore statistics, which are actually required everywhere. They're required in the financial space. They're required, surprise, even in the medical space. They're required in the engineering space. You could get into any sort of data analytics. So, in pure marketing, market research, those kind of spaces. There you need a lot of pure mathematics, a lot of statistical analysis. As a pure, in fact, it was kind of interesting. I had another colleague of mine whose son, I think, is doing his PhD in Geneva right now. And he's a statistician. He's done his study in pure math. And I think he's still doing his PhD, but he did his master's in flow. It went into applied sciences, his mathematics. And he was looking at flow of fluids and the frictions between them. Now, you may think that's a very, very specialized space and where could that have application? So he was actually working with a biomedical company to figure out what are the kind of products that they can develop and what kind of lubrication they would need, dry type lubrication, whether it's a PTFE or a Teflon kind of lubrication, and what kind of products they should develop, and doing simulations on stents that could go into cardiovascular product manufacturing. After that, he actually has gone to Geneva right now, or Zurich, I can't remember which place he's in, but he's in Switzerland somewhere, doing his PhD on flow, trying to figure out, statistical analysis of avalanches, because it's very difficult to predict when an avalanche will take place and how it will take place. So he's studying that right now, and finally he plans to get back into his medical space. So honestly speaking, when you think about pure mathematics, a lot of people think it's very constrained. The answer is no. Actually, there are a whole bunch of possibilities that are out there. And what I tried to give you was a snapshot of the different areas that you can work in.
Thank you. For someone who's just completed their BTech, would you recommend they get some work experience or get an MTech? And why do you recommend whatever you're going to recommend?
So if you're going for an MTech, I would strongly recommend try and pursue it immediately after your engineering or your BTech. The reason for that, apologies for that, something just went on in the other room and I was not sure what that was. But, the reason I say that for an MTech is because for an engineering degree, you're still going to be studying theory. And in the West, or even in India for that matter, maybe some practical application of that. So for an MTech for a BTech to an MTech, I would strongly recommend do it right after your engineering. The reason is because you're going to take a specialization in a theoretical field, and your theoretical knowledge is probably just fresh, right? Because trust me, when you get into the practical work environment, you're going to get distracted. You're going to do a lot of other stuff. That becomes important when you're going to do an MBA, which is more of a generalist. You're going to do a little bit of finance. You're going to do accounting. You're going to do financial accounting. You're going to do managerial accounting. You're going to do marketing. You're going to do supply chain. There you need to have a broader view of how a company runs. And that's why it's important. But if you're planning a technical education, I would strongly recommend, doing it right after your BTech.
Speaking of doing something right after your BTech, are there any jobs that integrate mechanical and computer engineering that one can get just after doing a BTech?
You mean computers and mechanical?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Tara, your voice was breaking a little bit. Absolutely, there are jobs that require both mechanical engineering and computers. I can tell you for a fact, I was a production engineer, a bad one at that, as I've shared multiple times. For my class of about 110 engineering students, actually 80 of them work in the space of IT today. So there is a very strong correlation, or there is a very easy transition between the engineering fields that you work. Just one myth that I would like to bust about engineering: whether you're an electrical engineer, whether you're a computer engineer, whether you're a mechanical engineer, or you're a production engineer, for you to shift, your first job is probably going to be in your specialization space. But after that, depending on your skill sets and your ability to comprehend and learn, you can actually shift across industries, you can shift across faculties, you can shift across spaces. Unless, of course, you want to get into hardcore R&D, right? If you're getting into R&D, if you're getting into hardcore research, then it's probably a little bit difficult. And let me give you an example of my career. If I think of these spaces that I've worked in, my first job was a sheet metal fabrication company. My second job was services for the oil and gas industry. And these were services, initially it was construction of tanks and pipelines, proper engineering work. Then it was servicing, cleaning of tanks, cleaning of pipelines using non-destructive technologies, inspection of pipelines using non-destructive technologies. Joining DuPont, my first job was in Fluoro Chemicals, which was basically the most common example was to actually manufacture hard disk drives, which all of us use. It was also used to put, dry lubricants on stuff, like needles, syringes, through which you take your injections and so on and so forth. My next job was in anti-counterfeiting. I was looking at IT solutions for anti-counterfeiting. I was looking at, overt authentication through holograms, photopolymer holograms for anti-counterfeiting solutions. After that, I was doing some strategy work, following which I was looking at consulting. I actually did safety consulting for a while. Then I was doing technology licensing to produce ultra-low sulfur diesel and ultra-low sulfur petrol, clean fuel. So I was working with refineries. And now I'm selling polymers into a space where it goes into automotive, it goes into medical. We serve nearly about 25 to 30 different industries in India. The other parts of my business look after proteins, as I talked about. We make probiotics, which go into the food industries, go into pharmaceutical industries, go into nutraceutical industries. We do a lot of stuff around electronics. As I said, 40 to 50% of your cell phone is made of our material. Solar panels, we do that. Then Kevlar, Nomex, bulletproof. So to be honest, I think when you have an engineering degree, as long as you have the interest to learn, you can easily transition across faculties in engineering if you choose to do so, especially computers and mechanical. There are a lot of opportunities to do that. You can get into spaces like design and CAE, computer-aided analytics. You can get into designing. You can get into, I can't believe it, I'm blanking out on it, but your CAD, CAM related stuff. You can get into your specialized automated machine manufacturing if you want to get into machine tools and design. Today, a lot of your machine tools require computers. So that's a great bridge. Cars are getting smarter. You'll be surprised how much your car communicates with itself. And that's going to increase in the years to come. So yes, it's easy to transit across various faculties of engineering. At the same time, if you're specifically looking at computers and mechanical engineering, tons of opportunities, especially in the automotive space. The word I was looking for was CNC machine, and I was blanking out on that. Yeah.
Okay, that being our last question, we've come to the end of today's session. Both Shiv and I would like to thank you, Mr. Anupam, and thank you all for joining us today. Before you log out, just a quick reminder that our next session is the coming Sunday, the 21st of June, with Professor Anusha Chari, an economics professor at UNC Chapel Hill.
Uh,
Once again, and good
Shiv,
night.
Tara, that's a great university, and I have a lot of friends from that place. It will be a good talk, I'm sure.
Okay, great. Hope to see you
Thanks a
guys.
lot. Hope you found it helpful.
Yeah, thank you.